Hello there.
Yeah, Olof, how you, man?
Very good. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thanks for joining me tonight or this morning for you. Um,
Yeah, afternoon even.
Afternoon, even better. You're awake.
Exactly.
Now, congratulations on your first ever tour of Australia. It's getting close. How are the band feeling?
Yeah, I was just talking about it to Elize before interviews started for the day, and we're super excited. There's, I mean, it's been a long time coming, obviously, and throughout the years we've been getting a lot of requests, to come down under, and we've been even been looking at a lot of offers throughout the years, but it never really slotted into place in terms of schedules and whatnot. But I mean, for the Catalyst, we really wanted to come and play down under, so we just made this a priority so we could make sure that it happened. So now it's finally happening, and it's just around the corner, and we're incredibly excited.
Excellent. Now, it's a long way to come to play a few shows, and a lot of bands don't get a lot of free time while they're here. But is there something that you really have to do while you're here? Something that you want to see or do?
Yeah, I mean, it depends a little bit on the schedule, which is not entirely set in stone yet, but I I mean, usually as a musician, it can be a lot of, obviously a lot of travel and quite busy, once you're actually on the road. But I try to make it a little bit of a priority to go out there into, the city that you're playing, get a little bit of a vibe. You would be surprised how many things you can actually see in a couple of hours or three, even if we're going to a lot of huge cities now. So let's say that I'm going to Paris, even if I go to Paris for the 17th time, then I try to, I find somewhere that I want to go. I usually just decide the day before and try to see that and get another piece of the puzzle of what the city is. And I mean, I've never been to Australia privately either, so I'm super excited to get a feel for the place and get the vibe and culturally and architecturally and all these things people wise. So I didn't make too many plans. I'm trying to leave it a little bit open, and just when doing these interviews, already getting some suggestions and these things. So I'm leaving a little bit of an open mind this time.
Sure. Now, musically, what do you know of Australia? Everyone knows AC/DC, but what
Mhm.
bands from Australia have been on your playlist over the years?
Um, Actually, on my very first show outside of Sweden, with my other band, Dragonland, back in 2003, we went to Japan, which was a phenomenal experience. And then we played together with a band called Dungeon.
Yep.
Yeah, which is not around anymore in that shape. So, but they were a little bit older than us, quite a bit older than us, and had lots more experience. And we were very new to the whole touring thing and traveling really far. And how one should approach it and think about it, and how do you play bigger shows. So they were very short and temporary mentors to us almost in a way. And then Tim, he went on to form this band Lord,
Yes.
which is also fantastic. Later, I heard when Dragonland came over to Australia, I think it was 2 years ago, or maybe more, I forget. But they had a promoter which also plays guitar in a band called Silent Night,
Yep.
which we are super excited to have at our Perth show. So yeah, so I know some bands, but I'm not as educated in the scene as I would like to be actually.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Dungeon, so hi to Stu and Glenn, my buddies that played in Dungeon that you would have shared the stage with in Japan. They're two very close friends of mine, so that's a good connection to have. So, with your music, you're very lucky to have three amazing vocalists on stage. And you've been playing the European festival circuit. So when you come here, you are going to be playing, smaller stages. How
Mhm.
how do you navigate the stage without running into one of them on stage? They're everywhere.
Well, I would say initially there was with this band there was a lot of that because typically when you start out as any band, then your reference point is, all the other rock or metal bands that have come before you. And, you watch a lot of DVDs and VHSs, and everybody's influenced about what happened back in the day, all the way up to your contemporaries. With Amaranthe, it's a little bit different, because while there are other bands with 3 singers, even if there aren't that many, there's not a lot of, there's really not anyone that does exactly what we do. So we didn't have very much of a template of how do you work with 3 singers. Like, do they all take the center stage when they are singing their part, or do they stand on their places? Like, it was a lot of this that we needed to figure out, basically, because if you have 10 singers, like Avantasia, for example, then you can do it as a musical. But when you have 3 actual front people who are singing the whole time, then you just need to approach it differently. So yeah, there was a lot of running into each other in the beginning. But as we have, developed this experience and developed the live show in general, it's slowly but surely just come together really naturally of how this should be working. Also, how does me and Joe and the bass player, how do we interact with the singers? And do I take center stage when I play a solo, or don't I? It's all of these questions that we've been answering now by trying it out, learning by doing, basically. And I think especially recently, let's say post-pandemic, we've started to perfect this rather than to do it well, if you know what I mean. So even with the small stages, we played some really small stages in the US last year. And while it can present a few problems, then it worked very smoothly, actually. So looking at the sizes of the stages, and when we were advancing for this tour, to me, it was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. It's going to be perfect on these stages also.
Excellent. So preparing for this, I saw some footage you playing in Wacken last year, and there's more fire than an Australian barbecue, shall we say. Are you going to be allowed to use that? Are you going to be bringing any pyro, even in a small form, to these shows in Australia?
What we usually do with the smaller stages is that we use CO2. So it's basically like gas that you light up that has a lot of the same effect, because obviously safety regulations in smaller venues are completely different. So unfortunately, that will not be possible. The pyros we usually do when there's a lot of clearance, and when you can do this safely, when you can guarantee the safety 100%. Also for ourselves, if we do pyros on smaller stages, it gets hot as an Australian barbecue, to quote you.
Yeah, and when you see that footage in Wacken, it's a very windy day, and the flames were just shooting everywhere. So that would have been scary enough, even though you had a lot of wide open space. So when it comes to production, do you have like an ultimate goal for the band? Like, if you had a budget with no end, what would your production look like?
Well, this is the thing, is that we've been step by step building our production and what it looks like throughout the years. And what's interesting about it with a band like us is that it needs to be scalable, all the way from Wacken to very small venues, somewhere in the deep south in the US. So it needs the general idea with the lights and how you build the stage needs to work more or less everywhere. So the same idea. So us as the band members can have a similar experience, and we know where to go and where to end up. But with that said, I mean, we really try to build it up a lot bigger, for the Catalyst run. And sadly, we can't bring everything to Australia, but we did bring a lot of it, essentially. So the entire light show and all these things, most of the stage setup, we also are bringing to Australia. So we're trying to be as ambitious as we can, since this is our first run there. But in terms of end game, there is no fixed end goal, but as the budgets increase, we just add, as much as we can.
Yep.
If I had an unlimited budget, then you can look at something like Tomorrowland from last year would be a good reference point, or Rammstein, which is obviously not very realistic, but it's okay to dream,
Sure. Absolutely. Now, when people are going to hear this band, if they've never heard them before, quickly go check them out after you watch our chat. The biggest thing that I take away from the band is melody. So even with 3 vocalists, a female vocalist, a clean vocalist, and a harsher vocalist, the band thrives on their melodies. So is melody king to you, or is the riff king?
Melody is absolutely king, because I mean this is what forms the structure of the song, is the melody together with the harmony, basically. And I think that's if you manage to knock it out of the park with melody and harmony, because a melody by itself can be great, but it's only when you add the actual harmony to it that it really soars and it really becomes something catchy. And you can really take bad decisions to make a really good melody bad if you don't add the right harmony.
Yeah.
So these things need to slot together. And then obviously, like in the metal scene, guitars are incredibly important.
Yeah.
But if you already have them, because we always, now when we're writing music, we always start with vocal lines and basic chord progression. And once you know that you have that, then you can arrange the guitars around it. It doesn't mean that you have to compromise with the guitars at all, basically. You can make them exactly as heavy as you want anyway. But you have a much clearer vision and idea where the song is heading, which means that you can also do a better job as a guitar player to actually match what the singers are doing and what the song is requesting. Because if you're only there, riffing away and playing your solos and not caring about the other stuff, it can still be great music if you're a good enough guitar player, but you're always going to be fighting an uphill battle, I would say.
Sure. And the good part about your guitar lines is they're melodies within melodies as well. So as you structure your solos to be singable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is even as much as I like to play fast stuff, which I also do, of course. What's really key and center is how does the solo fit within the song.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like since we have excellent singers in this band, I really admire their skill and their talent, and they could also do a lot more, a lot more wailings and a lot more technical stuff, but they also adhere to what the song requires. And I think a guitar player should approach it in the same way, that it should be singable, melodic, and memorable.
So take me back. What was the song for you that made you want to pick up the guitar?
It was Battery by Metallica back in the day. So my dad bought this album in the 80s, late 80s, I suppose. And I was very young back then. But when I heard that riffing, I hadn't necessarily heard riffing like that. I've obviously heard distorted guitars before, but to me, this is sounded completely different. So for a long time, I was really obsessed with trying to replicate this sound, which is not easy, of course.
Yeah.
But just the general like riffing and this kind of distorted, fast, heavy metal, sharp sound. Uh, and I was plucking on the strings of my mom's guitars, and like it doesn't sound even remotely like what I'm hearing, over there. So this really inspired me, and it was in the back of my head for a long time. And finally, I got an electric guitar when I was 10 or 11, and I spent all my time indoors trying to figure out, how to make the guitar sound like that and beyond.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you learn piano first?
That's correct. I was playing around with the piano for a long time before I really picked up the electric guitar. Um, so I'm not necessarily a pianist because I was never trained as a pianist, and I didn't practice piano nearly as much as I practice guitar, but it was always there in the vicinity and in the periphery. So the what I use piano for and keyboards the most for is to get an overview of the harmony. This is absolutely, practically possible on guitar as well, as you well know. But the good thing with the piano is that you replicate the octaves,
Yes.
and it's very easy to get an immediate overview. And you can also directly, like on a keyboard these days, you can directly transpose to the different keys, which can also be a tool.
Yep.
A little bit of cheating, but also a tool at the same time. So I really like to, when I'm fleshing out the harmony in any song, I really like to work in it on both keyboards and guitars.
Do you think that learning piano first gave you a better sense for building a song on guitar? Because everyone I know that learned a piano first tends to pick up other instruments a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like I said, it's an easier way to approach the theory, and you see directly how the chords are built. And once you know how the chords are built, all across the keyboard, then you start to see the guitar a little bit differently, I think, also. Because the way that I play guitar in the beginning wasn't necessarily very connected to the way I played keyboard. This came maybe a little bit later, let's say when I was 14 or 15 and started to write more real songs rather than only fast riffing
Yep.
and all that stuff. Then it was really interesting in my head to have it come together and to see that there are just different perspectives on exactly the same thing, basically. And I think also the way that I play guitar and the fact that I play guitar also informed the way that I play piano and keyboard. So it works a little bit both ways also.
Now, the band's gone through a few changes over the years. For you, what has been the most important change to happen in the band's career?
I think we had a very necessary. It's a different kind of change, but with the horrible time that was really sucked for everybody during the pandemic, had for us a small silver lining that we got a little bit of a break in order to get some perspective. So we had been touring nonstop at that point for 10 years, and we had released 6 albums in 9 years, which is a lot by anyone's standards.
Yeah.
So we got the chance to take a step back and what have we done so far? Where do we want to go in the future? How are we thinking about how we want to tour? And what kind of live shows that we want to play, and how do we want the band to develop musically? So we got a little bit of a better sense of direction instead of kind of just doing it.
Yep.
So I think we made a lot of changes there and then, which were incredibly important for the band, I think.
So it was more of a forced change by having to slow down, but you feel that gave you more perspective?
Yeah, exactly like that.
Okay, great. Now we're going to spin around again. You've written a lot of songs, but you're also would be a fan of other people's songs. Is there one song written by someone else you wished you had have written?
Yes, there's a lot. Certainly. Sometimes people just nail songs absolutely perfectly in terms of emotion, melody, harmony, structure, and ultimately the mix and the sound. Something that is outside of the metal scene. I have quoted this before, that Chris Isaak's Wicked Game, if you know it.
Yes.
This is a perfectly written song from every aspect, and it's beautifully recorded and performed also. There is not anything close to a flaw in this song. This to me is absolute peak songwriting.
I can tell you right now, I was standing in a photo pit watching him play it live, and live it's even better.
Oh wow, I'm very jealous. I've heard some YouTube clips of him playing it live, which is not a very accurate representation. There's also some recordings from back in the day, like MTV style recordings, and it
Yeah.
always sounds perfect, regardless of the medium.
So good. Now, okay, again, you've been a band for a long time. What's the biggest lesson you've learnt being in a band?
I think I think the main lesson is to always keep an open mind to change. Because I think when we started to play our first big shows with my previous band, Dragonland, I think once we have done that for a few years, played small tours, played some shows in Germany and Holland and Japan and whatnot, then you think that you're starting to get stuff figured out.
Yep.
How everything works, like how does it work the tour? How does it work with the business side? How does it work with writing songs? And you think you have it pretty much figured out, and then we started this band, and it was just on a different level entirely immediately. And you think that you could just translate what you've been doing before to what we were doing back then. And obviously we've made a lot of mistakes in terms of business side of things, for example, early on with this band. And I think that it's been an ever-changing thing. Like, let's say before the pandemic, then you think that, yeah, but I've been doing this now for close to 20 years. I have everything figured out, but then you get surprised again. So, I mean, recently in the last 5 or so years, I try to always keep an open mind for change. How can I be a better musician and a better, band member? And how can I plan and plot things out better and never be set in your ways and always be, curious and open-minded. I think this is the biggest lesson.
Awesome. Good lessons for life too. Now, our
It
time is
is
up.
indeed.
Our time is up for today. I want you to let everyone know in Australia what they can expect in like a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, in general, the band is in tip-top shape. We played a bunch of shows this year. We're really comfortable with the set list. We're bringing in an awesome show in general. We're also adding a few special songs, especially for Australia, which we haven't played in a very, very long time. So that's also really exciting for us, I can tell you. But just in general, people can expect what I think will be absolutely killer shows from a band that is genuinely excited to be down under for the first time.
Awesome, Olof. I look forward to catching the show in Brisbane. Safe travels over here. We hope you get to see all the things you want to see and hang out with as many of us as possible.
Thank you so much, man. And looking forward to playing Brisbane. And thank you for taking the time and take care.
No problem. See you soon. Bye.
See you soon. Bye.